and we are very grateful of the opportunity to speak to people like the ones who are attending your conference. And we hope if anything inspires you or interests you or you disagree with, you will talk to us after this, make contact with us. But I say that because at the moment, and what we're going to talk about really is not coming so much, the new kind of change effects are not coming from within the academy, they're coming from outside the academy. And we are kind of there trying to massage them into something that we can use. So it is a weird moment that it isn't the academy that's actually leading either the theory behind the changes or the practical tools and artifacts of these changes. So we're going to talk to you about our experience. There are 2 articles here, our latest articles, which you can find if you use that QR code. But we're going to share our journey, both theoretically and in terms of putting our money where our mouth is, so to speak, and creating tools that we think can realize what all of us have wanted for a very long time in contexts that are very challenging. So the first, there's 3 parts to our, 3 parts. We're going to talk about the disruption. Everybody's talking about the disruption that we're dealing with now. And for us who are interested in text and literacy, it's interesting because we have another language turn, with the tokens that go behind whatever Gen AI produces for us. So then we're going to look at the way in which we have tried to harness the new technology in an ethical and productive way. It's just a case study from our research. And then we'll finish with what we think are implications, but it's very hard to even say that because every time we give a presentation and we say AI in the future of learning, it changes. So we're very aware of that. But I want to start with this. We want to start with this because we just have to remind ourselves that for the whole of, if you take the whole of human history, and I'm sorry the proportions here aren't exactly accurate, but you'll get the gist. We were synesthetic, we were multimodal, right? And only when we got the brilliant invention of the printing press and the creation of formal schooling did things in a way narrow. They narrowed down to alphabetical literacy or symbolic literacy and a different set of controls set in place, both within the academy and within the school sector. And I want to add this thing because I've been reading and listening to all the people who are concerned at the moment that somehow what this new technology is going to do is spoil what we have, or not allow for critical literacy, or not create engaging learning experiences. But I think you might all agree that the largest effect in performance for learners is their socioeconomic background. It's the families they come from. That has the largest impact. What we do in these very constrained settings is not productive for all or even most. And we have a deliberate method of ensuring, that some are good, most are mediocre, and the rest, their fault, they're trailing behind. But this moment is a curious one and a different one. It does give us new tools. It opens up multimodality and possibility of hybrid learning spaces, new ecosystems for learning. It doesn't just demand it, it creates the conditions for doing it and all the tensions between what we think we're losing and what we think we might gain. But the one that we treasure, the one that we think is a golden standard, hasn't been around in the whole of human history for all that long. 150 years of schooling, 800 years of the academy. In terms of humanity and our time on the planet, it's been a short time. So yes, it matters to us, but I think we have to be open to what's potentially coming next, and we'll expand on that as we move forward.
Okay, so I'm going to start digging into this more recent events, particularly the nature of the generative AI work. And, this group is an applied linguistics group. The irony is a whole lot of important things have fallen in our lap, newly important things have fallen in our lap, and we've got to deal with them. So firstly, let me say some introductory stuff about AI. AI is everywhere. And what we have is, and I've kind of emphasized the word learning there, these are systems which don't just communicate in the sense of traditional transmission models of communication. They're systems which synergistically interact with you and learn from your interactions. They're dialogical kind of relationships. That's kind of interesting. But look, in a way, what this AI universe creates is a series of real problems for education. People are talking about cheating all the time. So we work, this is linguistics. Writing is a big part of what happens, not only in terms of writing as a focus of learning in a lot of places, but writing as a means of communication across a whole pile of subject areas, learning across the curriculum, literacy across the curriculum. What people are saying is that these things are democratizing cheating. So what we have, this is, by the way, a quote of Mike Sharples, an English ed tech person, and his rather wry take on this is for goodness knows how long, if you had enough money, you've been able to pay people in India or somewhere to write your essays for you in these paper mills. Democratizing cheating now means it's much cheaper. There are AI detectors which are kind of not reliable, as we know, highly problematic. But then there are all these tools where you can game the AI detectors. So it's a kind of a receding horizon. So this is something which is a big concern for people across all subject areas. But our little comment down in the bottom corner is there's a definitive solution, and this is it. So now the question is, if we do this, what are we doing to the nature of text? Text is stuff you can look up, stuff you can talk about, stuff you can interact around. What we're doing is we are reducing the world of knowledge or the world of learning to long-term memory, right? Forget about what they're writing on the page. It's a game of long-term memory. It's not a game. And by the way, the game ends the day after when you quite welcome to forget whatever you've learned. And by the way, it's not just long-term memory, it's individualized long-term memory. So one of the problems is what's the implicit view of learning that's involved in here. So this is kind of our starting point. One of the things, by the way, tracking back to this cheating idea, is cheating is kind of a shorthand for a bigger problem. It's a kind of too darn obvious to be saying. And we can have all the ethics in the world, by the way, which are going to say, oh, use AI and declare how you're using it. But look, it's very hard actually to declare how you're using it because you're so closely connected with it in a whole lot of ways. But the other thing about this is there's a kind of more serious problem, which some people are now calling cognitive offloading. These new AIs will do intellectual work for you. And to what extent does that reduce learning? That's a big problem that we want to try and address through the rest of this talk. So background now, and the reason why we're giving the background is we want to kind of make an argument, particularly for the linguists, that this generation of AI is very, very peculiar and very strange and there's not a direct continuity with previous paradigms. So paradigm number one, which really begins from, with computing, to be quite frank, is symbolic and rule-based AI. One of the first place where computer-mediated learning happened was Plato, a system that was built here at the University of Illinois, and there's an article in the History of Education journal where we trace that history, absolutely fascinating history. But you know what? This was the first time language was put into a computer, and it was an educational application which required a language-based interface, which was before they were just calculating machines. Well, now this was transposing the calculations across into text. There was a keyboard involved, and also the very first chat and the first emojis. A whole lot of things happened all of a sudden as early as, well, this system was initiated in 1959. So look, these things have been around for a long time as a kind of set of interesting issues. Then what happens really is the rise of natural language processing and data-driven AI. In the language area, the best, one paradigmatic example is automated writing evaluation, where what you do is, in a purely data-driven kind of way, you get human raters to rate 500 essays, and then when the system gets a new essay, it gives a reasonably accurate rating based on the configuration of the statistical configuration of the source texts. Text semantic AI is a completely different ballgame, and I think people talk about AI and they say, "Oh, it's been around for a long time." It's triggered by one particular piece of work, these Vaswani et al. At Google Brain, who built this idea of a generalized pre-trained transformer. Now, what it is basically, it's leveraging the semantics of language. And that's why for us as linguists, it's both incredibly interesting and incredibly important. So what I'm going to do in the next few slides is try to unpack from a language point of view what's happening there. So how do we come to this? Well, Mary mentioned before this world historic is an event of world historic importance, which is the mechanical reproduction of text in the printing press. Wasn't just Gutenberg 1450. In fact, almost the same thing had been invented in China in the 11th century. It wasn't widely used. Gutenberg, obviously, as we know, came to be incredibly widely used. So if our world of education became textbooks, if the world of education became students writing things, it was a very much literacy focused, the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. 2 of them were reading and writing, and arithmetic was also something you wrote, which is really kind of interesting because the LLMs treat math as writing as well. So that's beside them. That's interesting. So mechanical reproduction of text. What is really a paradigm shift with generative AI, and particularly this text semantic AI, we want to call it text semantic AI, is it's the mechanical production of text. So humans now, generative AI as well, can both make coherent meaning. So what we have in language is endless combinatorial possibilities, and both of these, humans and machines, generative AI is the first machine that can do that. But what's really important is the mechanisms. They both tame the infinities of language, but their mechanisms are completely different. And by the way, the fact that they're different then tells us how we might, the ways in which they're different, I might say, tell us the ways in which we then as educators might be able to productively use the AI. One question here is, does it just parrot what's in, it's ingested X billion words. It's built a series of weights about the relationship between these X billion words, which then turn into trillions of parameters, right? And one of the questions, the Chomsky argument and also the Bender et al. Argument is it's just parroting. I want to say, one kind of very interesting part of this history for the linguists is that it's the bag of words idea in a way, but it's not natural language processing version of it. It's a different kind of bag of words because we're looking at the semantic relation between those words. The irony is that the person who coined that phrase, bag of words, was Zelig Harris, who was Chomsky's advisor at the University of Pennsylvania, 1954. And when you go to the original paper, he says language is not just a bag of words, it has a distributional structure. So what this stuff does, it's got the 5 billion words and it maps the distributional structure, which is actually a semantic structure. Now, one of the debates that Mary and I have, and I'm going to turn over to her now, is I think this is actually creatively new text. I think it has a life of its own, and I'm opposed to the idea that it's just simply a stochastic parrot. Mary and I disagree. So let's see what Mary says.
Look, as the months progress, my disagreement gets more kind of difficult for me.
Oh, that's good to know. That's new to me. That's new to me.
My point is that all of it is fine-tuned by humans, right? Even its capacity to work independently, to respond in creative ways, All of that is fine-tuned. And we work with people who are employed in the fine-tuning at the front end, at the back end, and we know they're told, tone it down, tone it up, remove bias, let it do X, Y, and Z. So I think we've got to be really clear and to become involved in this side of it as well, that it is not going to automatically produce creative context the way we do as humans, because we are multimodal. We make meanings from multimodality, from our context, from environment, from engaging with each other. And yes, it has all the words and it has the semantic distribution that it operates with, but that is controlled by humans. And they can ask it to do bad things as well as ask it to do good things. So if you watch Black Mirror, there's a lot of fantasizing about how it can take over. But also, even in the Black Mirror imagining, there is some human that is manipulating the way that it operates. So I don't want to give up yet and say that it can be sentient, right? This thing is sentient. And that's why I think we have a responsibility to continue, working out how we shape it, harness it, use it, and not just imagine that it's going to become human in the way that we are human.
No, it's nothing like human, but it's actually, it's both, because you and I have not managed to read all 5 billion words that have ever been written, let alone think about the relationship between all those words, which is trillions. Human beings can't think like that, but the fact that it's dealt with this corpus, which is the whole of the human experience.
Rebuilt.
Yeah, but no, it's a lot more than a library. A library will not produce.
Yes, but only our
text.
But only our prompt.
I know, but what we'll do is, see, this is a really important discussion, right? And we better not spend too long on it. But the truth is, the reality is that as in the applied political field, we have to be thinking about these things. What the hell are what does it mean? What are the implications? Let me start digging deeper, which is in our kind of multi-literacies argument. We have this notion of design, something we work through with Gunter Kress, I'm sure you all know very, very well, which is not that language is the reproduction of the world, but what we do with language as humans is we rebuild the world. So what we have is found designs of all kinds, multimodal designs. We do design work, and the sentences that come out of us as designed artifacts, or the images, or anything we do representationally, is always a unique recombination, right? So what's kind of interesting about this is this machine is able to do that as well, and it has a resource that we don't have, which is 5 billion words and their relationship and the parameters by which they're linked. That's why it's kind of interestingly powerful in a way which is both entirely human, that's what Mary says, but also kind of superhuman as well. Now, I might say, by the way, on this topic, while I mentioned it, if you take the QR code, the most recent thing we've published, one of our doctoral students works for Space AI. Space AI does all the tuning behind the main models, and we've just written a piece with her about Bloom's taxonomy going upside down, which is it's not much good at facts for a whole lot of very interesting reasons, but it's really good at creative reconstruction of stuff in the world. So it's turning Bloom's taxonomy upside down. Not that Bloom's taxonomy was any good anyhow. That's a different argument, a critique. We won't go there. Okay, that's another talk, a different day. But it's in the paper's there if you want to take the QR code. Okay, so what's this damn machine do? Well, firstly, it operates in binary notation. It's a form of writing, and there are layers of composition that happen above that. So most programming happens many, many layers above the binary code. But what happens is this has pushed the programming way, way, way beyond those layers of conventional programming language into natural language. But in any event, the only thing that it can do is stuff that can be transposed through binary notation. Now, so let me just talk specifically about what that means. So when we represent stuff in text, there's a single universal scripting system, which is called Unicode, which now has 155,000 odd characters. So the binary encoding for for A is those zeros. There's a binary encoding for everything, right? So if we unpack that in terms of this text semantic notion, the graphemes can be kind of split into phonemes, sound representations, and ideographs, like the number 8 or plus or whatever. But these machines do not operate at the level of ideographs. They operate at the level of semantics, which means what they have to do is they have to put the phonemes together into tokens. Now, tokens, you know, the word, I put the word walk there, walk, ed, is 2 tokens because, you know, the past tense is a variable thing. And it's called stemming, by the way, which, again, for the linguist, was an idea invented by Michael Halliday at the Cambridge Language Research Centre in the early 1950s, an incredible place where a lot of the early thoughts about what was possible in AI were being thought. That's before Halliday went to Australia. So the interesting thing, by the way, from the point of us as literacy people, is that math and code are writing. They're unequivocally that, for the simple reason that they operate with graphemes, right? And they operate with ideographs, right? And what's interesting is code particularly works so damn well because it's a set of semantic procedural representations. But the point is that the machines operate equally well with math and code. So what I want to do is do a kind of a simplistic thing now and talk about, okay, what do we mean by these systems that run with like latent semantics? So here's the sentence. I walk to work, right? There's walk, which is the stemmed token there. And these are images. Yeah, that's me walking to work, by the way. Not really. This is generative AI being fanciful.
You asked it to do that,
yeah.
and you should have said no suit.
No, well, I just said I walk to work, and that's whatever. I walk the dog, and that's not me, but we actually have a standard poodle who never looks that good and doesn't look like that at all. But anyhow, whatever, it doesn't matter. It was I walk the dog, but by the way, you know, it's the same word, walked, right? And I walk the prisoners to their cells. Now, one of the things is if I go back through these. If I did a kind of a school grammar, it's past tense, it's a verb, blah, 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 blah. We've identified that. But in fact, these are 3 very different kinds of walk. This is very direction oriented. I'm A to B. I've got to get to work on time. This is not direction oriented in the sense that it's A to A. I come back to the same point, and probably the dog's walking me as the dog strains the leash. And this is being walked against your will. Now, what we can do in a very finely calibrated grammar is we could look at transitivity, case. I mean, case is not marked very well in English, but it's there. Go back to Halliday to see that. Voice, mood, and we can have all sorts of ways to account for these 3 different forms of walk, right? But what the AI does is the AI looks at the statistical relationship between these walks and then builds 10,000, 50,000 versions of walk, right? Based on the surrounding words. But in other words, what it's operating with is on billions of parameters, but doesn't have a grammar. Our way of mastering the infinite complexity of meaning is grammar, right? We have nouns and we have verbs, but in fact, this is a set of semantic primitives. That's actually what it is. This is kind of what the fundamental distinction is from our point of view. This is a quick sort of summary of what the fundamental differences are between the 2. Which, you know, I won't go through in any detail, but you know, one of the things is what our argument is, it's a semantic system, but the semantics is latent. It has no sense of meaning, but it ends up being a semantic system. By the way, in a way, very unlike data-driven AI, you know, because this is pre-trained. They've done a whole lot of data stuff, but by the time you get to the LM, there's no more data being done because they've built the language model. Which then becomes the object.
They're anxious that they're running out of data.
Yeah, that's a different problem. So yeah, of course, there'll be more data. And by the way, what we're going to get to is we built a system where we add data to the LLM, which I'm about to get to. Okay, so I'm done with that kind of general introduction, and then we're going on now to give a case study, and Mary's going to do an introduction of the case study. Then I'm going to jump out of the PowerPoint and show you some stuff we've built.
Well, for decades now, ever since we started thinking about how we can harness technology for our purposes as educators and for our values as educators, we've been frustrated, like many other people, by the kind of commercial products that are turning up that mirror a very traditional pedagogy, very narrow way of engaging with learners. The learning management systems we have, you upload, download, have a quiz, maybe a chat, the people who were forced into those during COVID, or who you see online as working in those environments, cannot move beyond very old-fashioned, very traditional, and very not very creative. They have to work very hard to make them creative. So what we've done all along is try to say, all right, we're going to have to work in an interdisciplinary way with philosophers and English graduates and coders and computing science, and trying to figure out how these tools can be made to be inclusive and to involve human engagement, right? And as well as the ubiquitous learning, because their value is that, of course, this technology is that it's anywhere, anytime. But for us, the values also of collaborative and reflection and multimodal really matter to us. So we want a workspace that does that, right? The technology has to be able to provide tools and the means for these values to be realized. And nowadays, of course, in what we call the help economy, but also what it's capable, if we harness the affordances of the new technology, is to introduce learning analytics, which means that you can assess people not at the end, like you saw in that picture, and just with memory, but as a consequence of collecting data about what you do as you go and giving feedback both to the learner and to the teacher. Also to produce the capacity for portfolios, but we've been talking about that for many, many years, but the possibility of them now to be systematic about how we do this is made more realistic. And then, of course, how do we engage with each other? As instructors, as educators, as professionals, we cannot achieve these goals that we've always wanted to achieve, and which are made possible by the affordances of the digital, by being the single educator with 20, 40, 30 learners. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. We have to be able to collaborate with each other, to share what we're doing, to design, we call it learning by design, to design ways of harnessing the tools for a range of other potential possibilities, and to prepare humans, our learners, for the future. So we've been doing that now for years. We created what was called the CG Scholar Platform, and we're going to show it to you. But right now, of course, not that we wanted to do this, but this is what we have to do, is we're thinking of ways in which we can use generative AI in a productive way that supports our learners. We've been doing this now for a few decades with our learners, both in, we started in Australia before we came to America, but in America, the possibilities for access to resources are somewhat greater. So we've been able to produce the kinds of tools that will now demonstrate live.
Okay, so we've had generative AI in this space now for 2.5 years. We kind of, as soon as it turned up, we started wading into it. And what we've done is we've built a completely new part of Scholar called Cyber Scholar, which has AI integrated. And what I'm going to do is I need to escape PowerPoint, and I need to start sharing the web. And I will show you a live version of this. So let me go over here and see where that window is. It's over here. Okay, so I need to, sorry, I've lost which one it is. Is this the, okay, I'm going to try sharing again. Go away. Just give me 1 minute, folks. Where's the Zoom gone? Oh, Zoom. Okay, share. Okay, got it. Here we go. So let me say one thing for the start is we have a real problem with the idea of artificial intelligence. And at the end of the talk, we're going to tell you why we think it's a terrible idea. But I'm going to say we use the word cyber instead. And what we mean by cyber, and we'll explain this a little bit more in the conclusion as well, is a set of feedback relationships. Cybernetics is about feedback systems. Okay, so I'm going to take you into Cyber Scholar, and I'm going to take you straight into a workspace. So this is essentially a multimodal workspace. And here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a work done by one of our students, and I'm going to show you the way in which AI, the student can interact with AI. So firstly, this is quite a elaborate piece of work. And by the way, look, what I want to say in the background, we've done this with high school students. This is usable from grade 4 and above. We've done this with medical students doing patient notes. We've done this with police trainees writing police reports. So this is a writing space, but in fact, it's designed for any form of writing in any discipline area from grade 4 and above. So this happens to be one of our students who is writing about generative AI in tailored learning in the middle school in station rotation. Station rotation, you probably know, is moving around the classroom, little stations, the students doing different things. Introduction, theory of concept background. I'm going to scroll through it just to show you the scale of this piece of work and what it is we're analysing, because you need to kind of know that. Station rotation here, this is the kids doing their station rotation. What's generative AI? She starts talking about differentiated and adaptive learning. She thinks about constructivism as a theoretical basis, active learning, differentiated instruction, applications in the middle school, AI in the classroom. Here they are using Gemini. Here they are using Calmigo. Here they are using Magic AI School. Critics and limitations. This is what we'd expect in a doctoral level analysis or doctoral level classroom research or whatever. Data privacy and algorithmic bias, all these things we've got to take into account. Conclusion, and then a pile of references down the end. Okay, so that's so you know what we're talking about. We've got an example of one of these multimodal works. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to begin an AI review of that. And the first thing I'm going to do in this space is I'm going to select a rubric. So here's our medical rubric for patient notes. Here's our essays for schools. This is a police report. And in fact, there's a rubric maker in here. Anybody can make a rubric in here, or they can use one of the rubrics that we've got saved on the system. Okay, so this is, in fact, our Learning by Design rubric, which Mary and I built as part of the whole extension of multi-literacies. That's what it happens to be in this case. I'm going to show you more of that in a second. Then what I'm going to do is we're not connected to any particular model. So Llama is Meta, as in Facebook. OpenAI, we know all too well. DeepSeek's the Chinese one.
We provide them.
Yeah, and what's kind of interesting is all of these are slightly different voices. And if you run different LLMs, you're going to get interesting ideas from different LLMs. Now, the teacher might want to say, sorry, we're just using this LLM, but we built the system so you can use any
into the Cyber Scholar platform.
Into the Cyber Scholar. So this is the background. And by the way, yeah, so Grok is Elon Musk, if that's your taste. Quen is Alibaba. Anthropic is kind of very interesting and very good. Some of the new Gemini models, Google, are pretty fantastic. Mistral is the French one, if you don't want to do anything Chinese or American. More Llama, and these are the very latest ones that have come up. These are very, very recent models if you want to kind of play around with them, and we get our students to play around with them. Sorry, I've got to do something else here. The second thing we do is we get them to choose a knowledge base. Now, what a knowledge base is anything, look, this is my subject. I'm doing cell biology. I'll put 5 textbooks in and 100 articles. These can be of any size at all. And what we do is we vectorize those. In other words, we process them in a vector database such that they work in the same way the LLM does.
We don't send them out into the wild in any of the spaces here. We could.
No, this is heavily mediated, and it's the educational mediations which are the interesting part. And we don't end up relying all that much on the foundation model. So look, I'm going to pull that out there. Now, I want to tell you about this particular one. Which our IT person gave an obscure name like this, is everything all our doctoral students and master's students have written for the last 5 years, plus everything Mary and I have written. 35 million tokens.
That's the bounded corpus.
That's about 32 million tokens. So this is an amazing damn resource. I mean, what our doctoral students and master's students do is pretty damn fantastic, to be quite frank. And their collective intelligence, their collective knowledge of, their teachers and their researchers and their thinkers is pretty amazing. By the way, 5 cell biology textbooks are pretty amazing too. So whatever it is you put into a resource becomes, in a way, the primary source. Close. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to start generating the review. right? Which is, the important part here is I haven't shown you the editor. I've just realized there's something I'm going to come back. Actually, before I start generating the review, I want to show you one more thing. This here is a floating editor, right? And while you're writing, so there are kind of two phases in this. I probably should have shown you the first phase first. By the way, this version was released last night, so I'm still not very comfortable with it. But one thing we added in the last 2 days is this thing here, which is while you're writing. So there's a floating editor, jumps around, wherever you want to do something, italics or a heading or any of those conventional bullet points, any of those conventional things. But over here, this left thing is AI help, which is a thing called Cyber Helper. So let me say what that does. While you're writing, you can brainstorm. Look, give me some ideas. Help me think about this problem. You can research stuff. You can plan. And by the way, when it does research, it's researching through the knowledge base. By the way, technically that's retrieval augmented generation. People who know AI, just to kind of a technical background. So you can search that knowledge base and the web, to be quite frank, and the LLM as you kind of think through your idea. You can build a plan. So, if you select the whole piece of work or you select a part of it, help me think through how I present these ideas. A small bit of work I can expand. A large bit of work which needs to be shorter I can summarize. I can translate, and the translation stuff actually works remarkably well. So the old kind of language pairs model that Google used is absolutely out of business now. Check flow, you can kind of look at the flow of the argument and the logic and your reasoning. Advise is, what do I do now with this damn problem or whatever. Proofread, of course, that's pretty handy and these are good at that. Or ask. Now, with any one of these things, ask is just, talk to the knowledge base that we've created, talk to the LLM, just
the teacher
ask a question.
It's like having your teacher personalized.
Oh, and by the way, when that can't answer, it goes back into the LLM, whichever one you've chosen. So let me just say that's what you do while you're writing. And the crucial thing we're able to do now by the way, you can just select one word and help you with that one word, or you can select a paragraph, or you can select the whole work. It'll help you with whatever you've selected. Now, the crucial thing we've done is we've instrumented this in such a way that we know exactly how you've used the AI along the way. And so we can answer this question. To what extent have you relied on the LLM, the AI, which has reduced your thinking because it's done the thinking for you, or to what extent has it pushed your thinking? So the way we've instrumented this with contextual AI, there's another technical discussion about the instrumentation, is that we can solve that problem that we have down the back with cognitive offloading, or otherwise known sometimes as colloquially as cheating. Okay, let me go back now to the review, and we've got the review set up now, and I'm going to start generating the review. And what it does, it creates a new version, because what we want to know is the ways in which this review has influenced your thinking. So the helper part is the embedded help, where you can do, just helps you get the idea together. You get your idea together, you write your full draft. And now what this is doing is giving you feedback on the big ideas. And what's interesting is how incredibly well this gives you very high level feedback. So it's now running through the I'm on Llama, which is slow. Sorry, I should have selected OpenAI. OpenAI runs much faster. I'll cancel the review and I'll change it to OpenAI just because we don't want to be sitting. No, not change the rubric. Sorry, go back. Change rubric. I don't want to change the rubric. I want to change the model. And I know that OpenAI will run faster. Look, and by the way, what we're just stunned by, to be quite frank, is what this is doing. It's taking a 5,000 word piece of work. It's taking our very high level rubric, and I'm going to show you how detailed that is in a moment. And this is actually, you've heard about agents in AI. These are actually agents. Each of these 10 things is an agent. So it's an experiential perspective, an evidentiary perspective, a conceptual perspective, a theoretical perspective. So these are, if you like, is 10 agents working their way through the work. But what they're also doing is referring to our 35 million token knowledge base that we put in. Okay, so
So the teacher scaffolds the experience
right.
and provides the core material that is relevant to whatever they're
Right.
teaching, whether music, literacy,
Anything.
history, whatever they want.
Right.
And so that, you know, they know that the knowledge that is made available to the learner through their search is going to be pertinent, accurate, it's going to have proper sources. So it's possible to do it, and it's not actually that hard to do. The capabilities are there for any educator to produce something like this.
Okay, so we're now getting to the end, and I'm going to kind of pull this across so we have more space to see the reviews. We're getting to the end, and I'm going to then show you what kind of, this is live, by the way. This is just happens to be, and it never comes out the same twice. In this system, it keeps a record of exactly what feedback you were given, so it can see the ways in which the feedback was kind of helpful to you. It's up to the last thing already. And by the way, what's remarkable is how quick this is. We had a 4-level rubric, so the star rating is based on what we put in the rubric. And let me just show you something about the criteria. We spell out in a fair bit of detail what experience means, prior knowledge, limitations in that perspective, that particular prior knowledge. I'll go down to the next one. We spell out what evidence is. It might be empirical and it might be, verifiable and reliable sources. We spell out what concept. So we kind of, the idea is each of these AI agents has to be reasonably well specified for the agent to be effective. But look, let's look at the kind of feedback we've got here. The text offers a comprehensive, deeply reflective explanation of the writer's interest and motivation. Clearly, the author goes further. I'm going to skip through this. The rationale for exploring AI integration is clearly articulated. For example, these are quotes from the text, right? The writers demonstrate self-awareness, and some of the writer, okay, they've got a 4 for that. That's pretty good. They got a 4 for evidence as well, but they only got a 3 for concepts. So let's go down here. These were the strengths, the concepts. But areas for improvement, conceptual overlap and redundancy. Some concepts, e.g. adaptive learning versus personalized learning, are revisited ones with only minor elaboration or differentiation. So what I'm going to say now is, what's the difference between, I'm going to talk to the AI down here, and I'm going to say, what is the difference between adaptive learning versus personalized learning, okay? Because it's complained that I haven't done that accurately in the work, right? And what it's going to do now is give us a kind of a response. And look here, in that many seconds, but what it's doing, it's referred to our fantastic knowledge base in doing it, or whatever we put in as knowledge base. And this is a really, look, personalized, there's a little table of features, the feature differences. Now, so this is kind of the ability to talk to the LLM. The other thing too is, let's say that I'm not a first language speaker, and Mary and I have just come back from India, where we were doing some work with small languages and LLMs in Odisha state. A relatively large language in that part of Eastern India is a language called Odia. How many people know it? We didn't know it, I've got to confess, before we went there. And this is now, it is not a translation, actually. This is rethinking the problem in Odia. It's not actually literally translating it word for word. So
it does any language that quickly.
Now, one of the immediate problems, by the way, is this is a pile of feedback, really detailed and specific feedback. And let me say this, look, please summarize this in 30 words, because I don't want to have to, look, tell me summarize what you mean. And look at this, it's quoting us from 2019. It's quoting specific references along the way. So a lot of the problems with hallucination kind of get eliminated. There are a number of ways to almost eliminate hallucination in the way you write the agents up, but also having a detailed knowledge base. So that kind of shows you a rough sense of what we've been trying to do in this space as of this release today. So that's a quick overview of what we're doing.
Sequence, did you, Bill?
No, which sequence is that?
Took it out.
No, actually, you know what? Because I'm conscious when we go 12 minutes, okay. I might skip that if you don't mind.
Okay.
Because we have a diagram which shows what's going on, but I think we'll go back to the PowerPoint now and try and finish in 5 minutes.
The main point to make here is this anxiety about the role of the educator, the role of the teacher, the role of the researcher. I mean, I think what we're trying to demonstrate by what we're doing here is that we have different roles now, different roles in scaffolding the relationship between, what we call cyber learning, the machine and the human. We have to consider that relationship and nurture that relationship through the way in which we design the learning experience for our learners.
Okay, 34. I don't really want to mention the analytics quickly. Do you want to mention
I
it?
do.
Okay, sorry.
Now,
I don't want to leave out any slides that are Mary's favourites.
they're not favourites. We all know that how you assess, the assessment is a tail that wags curriculum, and the assessment really matters. But in our case, before we did all this other work that Bill showed you, we put in an analytical tool. This is a petal. We call it an aster plot. And you can see it has a grid there about what each petal means. And every single student has their own aster plot, right? And it's divided into 3 parts because this demonstrates our pedagogy. You can turn it into as many parts as you like. But for us, of course, knowledge matters. But because we teach in an online environment, focus in that context matters to us. So there are activities that get graded related to your level of engagement and focus. But more importantly for us, because we believe in collaborative learning, solving problems together, is what we call help. You actually get graded for help. There's no point telling somebody to collaborate if there's no value in it, right? Or if they think they're not going to learn anything from it. So these 3 parts demonstrate our philosophy, right, of teaching in the assessment. But it doesn't come at the end. The learners can decide what grade they want. They can see the progression right against each one of these petals, and if they want to get an A plus, they can get an A plus. If they just want to get a B, they just get a B. The team sees all this. We also see the whole class. But these analytical tools are really possible to create now. So you have assess as you go, not assessment at the end, which doesn't feed back into the learning experience.
So what we're about to add into this aster plot now is AI. How you use the AI, how much work was yours.
And
the trick, by the way, is very granular instrumentation. So in the case of the Cyber Scholar, every keystroke, timestamps, click streams, everything. So and then the idea of the visualization is to bring a summary of that fully transparent to the learner. The teacher gets nothing more than the learner gets. Okay, so on to the last section. I know we're heading to the end of the hour, so I'll give some kind of conclusions. The first thing is people are talking about artificial general intelligence, artificial super intelligence. Well, look, rubbish. This machine that Alan Turing had in Manchester in the late 1940s was already able to find prime numbers that no human could. These machines have always been much better at humans than some things. So, the Turing test, by the way, is entirely deceptive. It's the funniest article in the world, and everybody's taken it seriously. This is the man who we need to blame for a lot of the artificial intelligence stuff at the moment. In fact, he was a great software developer and a genius in all sorts of ways, but he used it as a funding proposal back in 1955, the idea of artificial intelligence. And that's the definition. Well, we think this is a terrible definition because these machines are really different, and that's the power of them. We prefer the idea of cyber. This is Norbert Wiener looking very professorial with his cigar. The cybernetics, the Kubernetes is that person at the back of ancient, it's the oarsman who steers things this way and this way. It's a series of adjustments along the way. So what we do is we think about cybersocial intelligence. It's a learning relationship. And by the way, it's collective intelligence. It's everything that human beings have written and which have been jammed into these LLMs. It's what we put in the vector database, our knowledge base. It's the AI agents we've created as a sequence of prompts, right? So this is a kind of a cybersocial relationship. There's nothing much artificial about it. Now, humans are big in all ways, but the machines that humans have made are very different in the way they operate from the way that humans do. And of course, it's obvious. The brain is more than anything that can be encoded in a binary way. bodies have a whole lot of feelings which brains don't, and contexts have intrinsic meaning in them, which is the kind of multimodal point. And it's also the point made by J.L. Austin and other people in the linguistics area as well. Last thing to conclude, we're setting up this human-centered AI transformations research network, which is really focused on Europe. Please take that URL there, and we're building a series of books. We're looking for people who will contribute to those books and be part of the publications. And we also run conferences. And if you go to that website, you'll see the conferences we're doing. And lastly, now we're finished, this is our new learning in Scholar, our new learning kind of blog, if you like. If you take that QR code, you'll get all the stuff we've recently written. 11:40, we did it.
Ongoing and evolving.
Right.
Thank you so much for that. Really amazing talk. You covered so much ground in such a short time, I think. And we do have a few questions in the chat.
I'd rather leave this on.
Which might spark off a discussion. So Nick Moore is asking, can you tell us some more about the role of human teachers and educators in this learning space? I presume the learning space that you just walked us through.
Right. Look, the answer is we've got a big job and a completely new job, right? And it also doesn't need any coding skills. One of the crazy things about these LLMs is, the history of computing has moved from mucking around with zeros and ones to programming languages, and now, in fact, natural language is the programming language. So one of the things is that we've got a big job as educators. Couple of things you can see here: build the AI agents, build the knowledge bases, and build these cyber social learning relationships, essentially. And look, what I say is that knowledge represent, what we used to do is, the kids doing that damn exam, the answer was B, right? And they were really minimalist, problematic kind of assessment procedures. We now have a record of everything the student does, and we can ask them to do complex knowledge representations, even little kids, and track the nature of their thinking. So it means that in terms of assessment, in terms of everything, we've got a new job. And by the way, writing is now so important in every subject area. All us, you applied linguists, you've got a new, really big job to do.
But if you're in a university, you are constrained by the business model of the university, and the business model of the university requires presence, right? Because it has the tuck shop, and it has the buses, and it has the accommodation, and it has, jobs for the local people.
Oh, and someone has to mow the lawns.
And, and the gardeners, right? And the business model is not just about teaching and learning and research. It has all these auxiliaries that it's involved in. Therefore, it needs its presence. Even in our university, if you're an undergraduate now and you don't turn up, you have to turn up in person, you're not allowed to go online. I mean, that's what they're doing. They're trying to stop people. So we're kind of on our own, those of us in education who see what needs to be done. You're on your own, but you have to create alliances in order to test things. We are just testing things. But it's hard to get a systemic change because the money is tied up in those traditions, right? And the LMSs, millions of dollars, they've bought them, Canvas, they bought them,
Well, they license them every year.
And
they buy them every year.
And they cannot change because they were never architected for the sorts of things we wanted then, let alone now. So what do? I think, first of all, we have to argue the educator matters as the designer and co-designer, right? Not just the God on the stage or whatever that is, used to be, right? And this argument about presence, I mean, when you have a lecture hall, and you have 400 people or 200 people and you're speaking, where's the engagement, right? There isn't. I mean, there's sacred things that we're hanging on to, but we need to do something with these spaces. And mini conferences, get together, change the ecosystem, flip the classroom. The content can be delivered. When you come online, if you're lecturing online, that's just crazy. You should be engaging with the learners online. So it's changing the ways in which we harness that technology for continuing to advance our values.
But look, one really important thing is we need these technologies no matter whether it's in person or online, right? You know, these things are really great things to have. And our argument we've made about educational technology for some time now, and we continue to make it, is there is no difference in between online and in person, right? There's not a substantial difference in terms of the kind of architectures that are possible and the architectures you need to do good learning. Now, we know that traditional architectures, let's say the textbook and the lecture and the test, were problematic architectures. You know, you can have them still, but they're anachronistic. They're part of that world that was, as Mary said, was invented 150 years ago for regular schools, 800 years ago for universities.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. The second thing is we exclude people from universities because of the unconscionable cost of learning. The unconscionable cost is you can't be working while you're doing it if you've gone to a university. You know, it's hard to work. Maybe you can, maybe you're struggling. The fees are becoming really problematic. So one of the things is, how do we build new ways of building organic kind of, you know, knowledge cultures, if you like, or less expensive ones. So that's one of our kind of big games here, big aims here. And, you know, one of the ironies is these environments are ones where a lot of the old aspirations of liberal education can actually be realised now. That's one of the great paradoxes here.
Yeah. So, Greg, yes, but remember, we have the corpus that our students go in, we control. The rubrics we control, right? So we've already got that part there. And then when the students use the AI to get their feedback, they then have to have feedback from peers. So that, because everyone's learning in this space, we don't have any complete answers. So we don't only in our platform only allow for online AI feedback, which we track. We then require the students to talk with their peers about the value of that and their value to themselves. So that becomes part of the analytical tool.
I'm going to answer Mishka's question now. You know, our universities corral things in compulsory learning management systems, which are worse than terrible, right? But how many of the students use search as part of their work? When they use search, Google's keeping a profile of you because, you know, you get a better search if you log in and they know who you are. How many of the students use Gmail, right? Or does the university use Gmail down the back? You know, a lot of universities use Gmail even though they've got their name on it. How many of the students are now using AI? And of course, OpenAI in its last release, last couple of weeks, is keeping a profile of you in order, ostensibly and correctly, by the way, to give you more appropriate responses because it gets to know you. So our students, as part of their learning and part of their work, are using these all the time. Now, so in other words, it's kind of to force people to use some god-awful learning management system in the name of data integrity. And by the way, don't tell me the scandals about how Canvas uses your data. Forget about that. It's a separate problem. So what we've done with this system is we built a system where absolutely nothing goes to the LLM other than highly abstracted things. In other words, all these interactions are within our system. The LLM learns nothing about individual students and learns nothing much about what's happening there because it's a whole pile of mixed up, abstracted stuff. So we built something which is separate. But one of our ambitions, by the way, is to build a profile of every student, right? So in other words, that's going to freak people out. For the European context, I've got to finish this just a moment. For the European context where data rules will not allow you to do it, we're going to have the capacity to turn that off, right? But imagine if you've done 5, 10, 15 essays here and the system remembers all the work you've done. Yeah. Now that's the point at which it becomes a really helpful tool.
Right.
Right. So in other words, Mishka, we have to tackle this problem. As I say, our way of dealing with it is, okay, if this freaks you out, we won't, we'll turn it all off.
However, we need to declare that all our students in our programs sign an IRB form. Because what
we're writing it up.
What we've shared with you is an ongoing research project. All educators have to be ongoing researchers. That's what we do. And as a consequence, we sort of despaired and created our own tools. But and we're gathering data from our students about what they value, what they don't value, and we keep modifying the tools and keep changing them. It's just become part of what we do. But they do sign an IRB. They don't have to allow
because
us
we're
to
doing
use
research.
data.
So what
Yes.
we're doing is we're writing up what we do, and everything we do,
Yeah.
we've got a lot of users working in there doing things the day after. In the case of our students, they're really smart, really savvy people. So we get fantastic feedback, and things break and we have to fix them and all that sort of stuff. So yeah.
But you know, there's nothing. I said this at the very beginning. It's a changing scene all the time, and we as educators have been taken as not people that need to make tools. You know, we had the textbook, we had the blackboard, we had the whatever, but now we have to not just allow the system to give us tools that are historic and no longer relevant. You know, we have to be part of arguing for changing what's out there, or you know, harnessing things that we can adjust for our own purposes.
Right.
But as
So-
Bill said, and as I keep saying, our role is more important than ever as educators. More important. It's not going to go away because the AI is there and you can use it for any purpose you like.
Jackie, I'm going to respond to your question now, which is the students at the Open University can use AI, but they can't put the module in. Well, look, they're going to get a much better response if they put the module in, by the way. And how do you know if they don't put the module in? How can you ever know? So one of the real problems is to build these helpful systems which keep a track of that, essentially. And by the way, keep a track of it for the student, right? You know, so they don't lose track of what they've done. And in our case, try and keep a pretty granular track. We're going to not only know how much you use the AI, we're going to know the ways in which you use the AI, right? So using it to plan is different from using it to proofread. That's the thing. The answer is yes, that approach will demise itself because there's no way of knowing, right? And by the way, as I say, putting the module in is a great idea. And that's effectively what we've done with our retrieval augmented generation.
Right. So I suppose the bottom line is that we're just trying to inspire you about what's possible, what you can do, and instead of just theorizing around it, we actually give you an example of how it can happen.
And crazy thing, it's all applied linguistics, beginning to end. You know, what a strange turn of events. This kind of thing's landed in our laps as the most important thing to be doing in this particular moment.
Yes. People are nervous. You're not kidding.
Right. I mean, the problem with plagiarism is that all our intellectual work is iterative. You know, what we want to track is the ways in which it's iterative. And we want ways to be declaring that. You know, the old systems of citation were circumvented by plagiarism. The new systems, we have systems of acknowledging the provenance of our ideas. We just need resilient systems which can also acknowledge the provenance of our ideas in AI.
Yeah, Rachel. Yeah, you're asking a hard question. We're not coders, and we're not makers of things. Beyond trying to create ecosystems for our learners that prepare them for what the world is moving into, and that involves technology. But the technology that's out there, first generation, locked in, is no good for us. So yes, but we model this. Now, do you think they'll take it up? No, because they've invested so much money in that system.
Oh, but look, that
and
system,
they put patches on it.
if that system is not broken already, this is going to break it. Rachel, just by way of full disclosure, we have a not-for-profit, which Common Ground's a not-for-profit based here in the research park at the university. Our intention is to make this widely available, and we need to build modest and careful cost recovery mechanisms, including some people get it for free because they can't pay, and other people, if they can pay, should pay. Our university pays $4, $5, $6 million a year to Canvas. What a damn waste of money. So what we're hoping to do is make modest charges for this. Grammarly is another model of how to do this. Grammarly have a thing called publisher, yeah, what's it called? I'm trying to think of the name now, which is actually very problematic. That's another whole story, because what it does, it takes control of your clipboard. Without you give permission for Grammarly to have your clipboard. That's the only way I can know where things come from. So it's not just permission in the browser, it's permission to take some control of your machine. Okay, fair enough. You know, but it's actually pretty crude.
So being ahead of the game is a challenge. Nobody has yet created what we have created in tracking how much you use AI and how much you don't use AI.
By the
Or
way,
how
we'd
much
love
you
people
use.
to try this. We're
But-
nearly at the point where we can make it available to people, and trial it from the point of view of researching and reflecting this new crazy AI universe.
And to be honest with you, we're looking to collaborate outside of America.
Oh, don't say that. Don't say
Yeah.
that. Don't say that.
Maybe with people.
No, we have some very nice projects
Yeah.
going in Brazil and in Europe. Oh, by the way, can I say to people, our strongest collaboration at the moment is a long-time collaborator at the University of Nottingham, Gabrielle Zapata.
Yeah, she's cool.
So she's fantastic. So if anybody wants to do this work and she's researching it and writing it up and doing some amazing work. So yeah.
Do you have tips for teachers who are just creating traditional materials for the higher ed academic literacy classroom? You know, there's no either or here. You know, like all the sources we have available to us matter. It's just how do we deliver and engage with them. And you know, doing it face to face is important, and we've got to keep doing it. Doing it online is important. It's rapid. You know, my word I use is repertoire. We have to develop repertoire, pedagogical repertoires. And we have to be always, we've done that, tested things. You know, in this country, it's become difficult at the moment because they have a list of words that you're not supposed to use, which go against any logical thing that we've all kind of committed to, right? And, you know, we're waiting for grants. And if you put diversity in it or inclusion or women, your grant got cancelled. I mean, it's that we're in this crazy moment. So as this world is moving, but remember, I said not from within the academy. It's the 6 guys in America, the 2 guys in China, 1 guy in France. You know, they control this, becoming wealthy and wealthy and wealthy, and they control what happens in that space. And we're out there like, you know, rabbit with a light shining in our eyes. So yes, we have to experiment, but Rosa, you have to collaborate, right? Some things will remain, the traditional things still matter, you know, debates, discourse, you know, critical reading, poetry. Yes, but how do we do it? And how do we use the physical space? We can't use physical space for lecturing, and we can't use digital spaces for lecturing. That's completely
well,
off.
we can, but in a different form. But it's not. You know, it's got to be in a different relationship to these other tools that are available.
But the other thing is our learners are drifting further away from us, you know, whether it's in a K-12 school or in a higher ed or a college, what they do outside to get knowledge, information, make meaning, the tools they use and how they get it is going further apart from what we do in the traditional school or the traditional higher ed setting.
And look, let me say this about our kind of existential experience of this work. Firstly, we've worked in this area for a long time, digitally mediated learning, applied linguistics, and we've been shocked by what's happened, just stunned by what's happened. And here's the conclusion. You saw that feedback in that piece of work from that student. That's more feedback and better feedback than we could ever give. And I've got 2 types of could. We couldn't do it in that time frame. 3 types of good. We couldn't do it in that time frame. We couldn't do that much of it because we don't have time to do that much. And probably we could never do it as well with all the time in the world, right? So that's the point where our kind of moment of awakening was, okay, this changes everything, right? And how did then we train teachers to operate in these kinds of environments, which, if you like, you know, magnify their intelligence. It's the rubrics or agents they've created. It's the knowledge bases they put together. It's the projects they give students to do. Teachers are still really, really important, but all of a sudden, by the way, no more grading. No more assessment, because the machine will do that far better than you can.
Is that a happy note to end on?
I think that's a very happy note to end on,
That's a
actually.
fabulous note to end on.
Yeah, we could probably talk for another half hour, but I just want to say thank you very much. That was fabulous. You're just such generous speakers, actually. Really wonderful to listen to. And I want to thank everybody else who's been here today and all our presenters as well. So thanks very much I've really enjoyed myself. So I think it's been a fantastic event.
Okay.
Thank you for your
Have a good
interest.
weekend, everybody.
Good luck to all of you.
See you then. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.